He was not a refugee.
He's been the touchstone for what's happened in the last 24 hours.
All the politicians have mentioned him, saying this is why we must act.
Bill Shorten shaken to the core.
Shaken to the core, referring to the boy twice as she. That's how shaken he was. The child, tragic though it was, this incident, had been living for 3 years in Istanbul, in Turkey. His father was working
So
in
not
Istanbul.
in a camp in Syria.
Not in a camp. They were getting money from the father, Abdullah, his sister, in Canada. And they would have been there still, but for the fact that he had no teeth, and he wanted them fixed. And the father and his sister in Canada was sending the money, said it was all too hard. It was going to cost her $14,000 plus, and they decided to go to Europe for the treatment instead. Have a listen to his sister talking about these facts.
The situation is Abdullah does not have any teeth. So I've been trying to help him fix his teeth. But it's gonna cost me $14,000 and up to do it. He need denture, he need teeth implant. Actually, my dad, he came up with the idea. He said to me, I think if they go to Europe for his kids and for better future, I think you should do that, and then we'll see if we can fix his teeth. And that's what I decided 3 weeks ago.
And then, of course, what happened is the boat was swamped by waves in the journey.
The child did not have a lifesaver. Right, so it's a tragedy, but not, this is a YouTube clip. You can get it, and I find it astonishing that There's
no doubt about the veracity of it.
No, there's none. I find it astonishing that no reporter wants to report it or even acknowledge its existence or acknowledge there's this side of the story. In fact, Channel 9, I mentioned 7:30, they already mocked Cory Bernadi for mentioning this.
Yes.
Mocked him without giving any of the evidence that what he was saying was correct. They just mocked him. And here, listen to Channel 9, they did exactly the same. Tonight you'll hear the reporter, Lane Calcutt, you'll hear Cory being quoted, and then you'll hear one of Cory's fellow colleagues in the Liberal Party, Ewan Jones, or whatever his name is, mocking him. Have a listen.
Liberal Senator Cory Bernadi stunned even colleagues by suggesting not all were Syrian refugees and accusing the Greens of capitalising on the emotion of the drowned toddler.
He's been living in Turkey with his family for 3 years. His father had a job there. That's not someone fleeing persecution. Some of them are ditching their IDs and pretending to be Syrians.
Do you really expect anything other than that from someone like Cory? I think Cory plays to his constituency.
Now, no context was given to the fact that Cory was actually speaking the damn truth.
And Ewan Jones is not playing to his constituency?
No. It is disgusting. The truth no longer counts.
Well, Senator Bernardi's on the line from Canberra tonight. Thanks for your time, Senator.
It's a pleasure, Steve. Good to be with you. Hello.
So
Cory,
Andrew's,
what do you make of
Andrew's
this?
stated the facts. We played the audio. You stand up in the House and you tell a story that is absolutely truthful, and everybody says what an awful man you are.
Well, it's not the first time it's happened to me, I've got to tell you, but it does show how I think shallow politics has become in this country. You have a circumstance where I outline the facts in I think, a very measured and moderate manner to highlight the hypocrisy of the Greens using this tragedy to, seek some political advantage, and then I get people from my own side coming out making those sorts of disparaging comments. And I have to say, Ewan Jones is a jovial fella, and I thought he was joking when he said he wanted 50,000, new refugees here next week. And but I realise it's not a joke. And these people, or people like Ewan and others, are making decisions based on Twitter feedback or Facebook feedback or all of this stuff. And
candlelight vigils arranged by GetUp.
Yeah, all of those things. And I think policy making has to be more substantial than that. It's got to be. You've got to remove a substantial amount of the emotion from it and say, what is in the best interest of Australia? What is in the best interest of those we're trying to help? And how can we best do this? And, you've got to establish the facts and the truth before you can even pretend to address it. It
seems to me it's absolutely astonishing that the truth doesn't count. Malcolm Farr, news.com.au, also mocked you without actually establishing or trying to establish the easy-to-check facts. You were speaking the truth. Now, here's another thing that most politicians don't seem able to openly say. That is, we would be better off accepting the Christians over in Syria. If we have to accept refugees, let it be the Christians for two reasons: the most persecuted and the most likely to fit in. Seems to me open and shut case. Mate, have you seen the vilification of this idea, particularly on the ABC? Why is it not possible to say this?
Andrew, it is possible to say those sorts of things, but I want to just go back to your prior comment about Malcolm Farr and the articles that were on news.com.au. I had to actually contact them and say, I know that you're abusing me, but please get your facts right. The beach was not in Greece, it was actually in Turkey.
He said it was in Greece.
Yeah, he said it
was
Facts
Bodrum
don't
in
count.
Turkey.
What the hell? What the hell?
So, look, this is journalism by Twitter and
Yep.
or journalism by, Facebook or YouTube, and that's not how policy should be set. So,
The public's just not getting an honest opinion, an honest take on what's really happening.
Well, worse than that, their attitudes, the public attitude, is being hijacked and portrayed in a way that it's not. Now, our audience last night and again tonight, flooding us with reasonable, sensible ideas and arguments about what we should and shouldn't be doing.
And I think the feedback I'm getting anyway is very, very clearly that what I've said has touched a nerve with so many Australians who are grateful for the truth because they think they're being sold a pup by many of their politicians and many in the media. And when you come back to it, that amongst the most persecuted people on earth, in fact, the most persecuted people on earth are Christians right around the world, and particularly in the Middle East. And both, I think, the Prime Minister and Julie Bishop said today that these people will never have a homeland to return to because wherever they go in the Middle East, they're loathed, they're targeted, and they need a safe haven. For many other ethnicities, for many other people of religious belief or cultural beliefs, there are safe havens everywhere for them. And so the people who are truly most desperately in need are those that are in, serious physical peril. And, they are the minority groupings which the Prime Minister has talked about, including Christians. And we should be doing what we can to help those in most need.
No, but the thing is, again, a number of your colleagues do not dare say it openly. They talk about religious minorities. They don't talk about Christians. It's like you cannot mention it without being slammed as a racist. Here's another thing, though, Cory. I believe you're a good Catholic. Is that correct?
I'm not a good Catholic, but I'm Catholic.
Well, you're Catholic. Are you disappointed with this? I won't say he's an idiot because you're a Catholic, and I don't want to offend your pontiff, but are you astonished by this man's behaviour in the face of this crisis? He's agreed, for example, to take in, he says Europe should follow his leaders, taking in 2 families into the Vatican. And he thinks all the other parishes in Europe should do it. What do you make of his leadership?
Well, I'm not surprised that, the Catholic Church is extending compassion, but I think it is extraordinarily short-sighted, if I may say that. Right now what's happening in Europe is their borders are being invaded, and you cannot justify that. It will change Europe immeasurably, and it will ultimately, I think, cause them to regret or have regrets about this experience for decades to come. And I do find it extraordinary that rather than say, hey, we need an orderly migration program in which, it's sustainable and it's going to work to the benefit of the continent as a whole, we've got people just saying, well, like Angela Merkel and others, well, let them all in. We'll sort it out.
I think Merkel is in a cleft stick here. This is German Chancellor. She's got 800,000 people allegedly coming this year. She can't turn them back, so she's trying to say, oh, we'll welcome them, trying to make a silk purse of a sow's ear. But Germany will not accept this next year as well. There's no way that Germany can keep adding 1% of its population every year in Muslim immigrants who come across the border.
But Andrew, this is not a new phenomenon. I'd like to take you and Steve back and your listeners back. 4 years ago, I went to Europe to look at the challenges of the migration programs there. And I went and met with those that were in favour of more migration, those who were against it. I met with a chap named Geert Wilders because I wanted to inform myself about the issues that were going on. That was the first confrontation of the Schengen agreement, which was when Italy said, send all these asylum seekers up to France, and France closed the trains border.
The Schengen Agreement, for those that don't know, is the agreement with the European Union, no borders, which is why you can motor from Germany to Holland to France to Belgium, whatever. You don't cross. No one asks you for your papers.
That's right, and France actually closed the border because Italy was sending all these asylum seekers or refugees up through them. And I got back and filed a report, and I was roundly abused for bothering to go and talk to people who were concerned about this. And what I said at the time was, if you don't deal with these issues, they give rise to equal and opposite reactions. So that's
right.
And sometimes they're just as reprehensible and unpleasant, and leads to a great deal of division. And that's exactly what we're now seeing in
Germany. They say reports say maybe 200 anti-immigrant protests as well. It could get very ugly.
It could, and there's anti-immigrant parties. There's a lot of nationalist parties that are arising on the left and the right. It's dividing countries, and it's dividing the entire continent. Now, my responsibility is to Australia, and I want to make sure that Australia never goes down that path, that the people that come here are welcomed, that they get along, they make a contribution, and they feel safe at every level. And that means, obviously, we've got to take into account, the harmony of our own populace.
Without getting you into too much trouble, were you a little surprised at the number of your colleagues, reportedly 17, who spoke out today about the urgent need for us to do more?
No, not at all, because I do think that the Australian populace sees this as a tragedy of unprecedented proportions, or at least in recent history, in the last 50, 60, 70 years. And I think there is a great sympathy amongst the Australian people for those who are genuinely in fear and at risk of life.
But it's no worse today than it was last week, last month, 2 months ago.
No, that's indeed the case, except I'll give this credit to the government. They have been increasing the allocation to genuine Syrian refugees from 98 under the previous government to some 2,000 or 3,000 in the last year. But we've got to play a role. We have to make a contribution, and we've got a generous humanitarian intake. I'm happy for that to be maintained, but I want to make sure that we are genuinely targeting those most in need, not those what I've described as opportunistic refugees, which we saw under the Labor and Greens party.
Don't dare say that, you'll get your head taken off.
Well, unfortunately, that's what it is. They see an opening and they say, I'm going there because life is a bit better. We need to help those people who are in genuine risk of death or persecution, not those who are relatively safe and fed and sheltered in third-party nations. And this is the challenge for us. We've got to distinguish.
It's a huge issue. Thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it very much.
It's my pleasure. Thanks.
Senator Cory Bernadi there. Andrew's with us, a stack of calls. Apologies for the delay. We'll get to them after this.
There are more Sydney